Brought to you in association with Grendel Press. This is Werewolf the Podcast, a serial killer drama.
Hello, this is episode 201. Yeah, 201, God, who knew? We are on Cocktails with Cab this week, so if you want to go and listen to us on Wednesday night, I'll put a little link down in the Linkify description place. Yeah, go and give us a listen. We're on there with Grendel Press, our erstwhile partnership, talking about stuff. With Cav, always a great podcast that, so I would want to recommend it. Other than that, do your thing, you know, live life long and love and all that kind of, yeah, whatever. Have a good one. Bye. Well, Gupsi, the little green beastie, had run down the aisle between the rows of kids. Aye, I know if this is your first episode of this auspicious cult podcast thingy, that doesn't really give you much of a hint as to what we're going on about in this story, but it's because we're a weekly serial, and recapping the story from episode 199 would take at least, a few minutes, 2 paragraphs of writing, which would be a waste of me talking. I mean, you can go and listen to it. That would be probably the best way of catching up, but then we don't have to waste any time introducing this week's episode other than the sentence, Gupsi, the little green beastie, had run down the aisle between the rows of kids. Ah, shit, I wasted the time anyway, didn't I? Damn, I could have just done a recap. Ah well, please forgive me. The kids, tied to the chairs, were still chanting. That sounds like a weird chant in itself, doesn't it, The kids, tied to the chairs, were still chanting. The kids, tied to the chairs, were still chanting. They were chanting, I believe in fairies. Anyway, let's leave this useless recap at that and begin the reason why you're here. This week's story. Well, I hope that's why you're here anyway. Gupsi had been gone for a little while now and I was getting bored. I do that. I'd seen all there was to see and I was hoping that something interesting would happen soon. Fortunately, or unfortunately, it did. Struggling to walk down the aisle which Gupsi had just ran along was a thing. It was huge. No, that doesn't do it justice. It was a descriptive word. Yeah, I'll do. It's fucking huge, and it was struggling to walk down the aisle as it had to carefully place each foot and precisely move its body so it didn't damage its surroundings, which were small children in wooden seats. So yeah, it would have made a bit of a bloody mess if it had strayed more than a few inches in either direction. The thing looked like it was built from a skip. Oh God, what's the Americanism for skip? Dumpster? Yeah, that's it, dumpster. I don't mean it was built from like the metal dumpster skip thing itself. I mean sort of the crap that's in the skip, the garbage or whatever. It was a creature built from waste. It had all the bits you would assume would be present for like a person, a head, well, you get the idea. It was I haven't got a clue what it was, but sometimes you describe someone as a pile of shit, and this thing was literally a huge pile of shit. As it got closer, I noticed that it was bigger than I actually thought. It wasn't fucking huge. It was humongous. That's a good word, isn't it? I could tell this because a little purple light was floating in front of it, and the purple floating light was a fucking fairy. The fairy, the Foxglove. As I got closer, I could see others were with the group, popping into view now and again, and they were two more like black cloaked figures like those on the stage, and some more sparkly fairies. And at the back, little Gupsi himself pulled his cart with the barrel on it and everything. As I got closer, I could see that the fairy was flying with her arms folded and pausing briefly and looking carefully at each child she passed. At one particular point, she stopped and flew closer to the child that was sitting in the chair there, right there. She floated right close up to its face and then poked it with a tiny finger in its in its unblinking eye. The kid didn't react, it just sat there blankly looking into nothingness. The kid was dead. Its head fell forward as she brought her finger back to her body. Her face registered disgust as she looked at her now kid dirty digit, I suppose. She clicked her fingers and Gupsi pushed his way past the other things in the row, grumbling. He sort of knelt down looking at the floor as he presented a clean, crisp handkerchief to the little green woman. She snatched it hastily from his grasp, and I smiled as I saw for a moment a little look of hatred flash across the little goblin's face. Nice. As she cleaned her hand, she stared at the child, shaking her head, obviously saying something angrily to the team of creatures behind her. Eventually, when finished with her personal care, she tossed the cotton cloth to the little green thing and clicked her fingers at the cowled Jew who came forward to the chair holding the small child. Well, the chair was holding the small child. They weren't. It was funny to see the two cow figures kowtow and bow as they passed the tiny floating being with her arms crossed and tapping her tiny foot with impatience while standing in the air. They looked like she was going to lash out at them at any time. They were frightened, creepy black cowled figures. Once at the chair, they started undoing the leather restraints of the dead boy. Once the child was free from the seat, the two figures slunk back and the giant figure, under some instruction from the fairy, lifted the tiny body and held it high to his face, sniffing it. As the beast held the boy, its mouth opened, and I think it was a tongue that extended and licked the morsel in his hand. He was going to eat the body, but then stopped and shrank back, bringing the little body back down to the ground. The teeny tiny fairy had been giving him a tirade of abuse at his actions, and the crap construction was scared and shied away from her. It looked very sad for a pile of crap. After shouting at him for a while, which I couldn't hear, the creature nodded in contrition and very gently and carefully took the body to Gupsi's little trolley, where the glowing, open-topped oil drum was. The fairy was now talking pretty heatedly to the two cloaked figures, and they were nodding a lot before they set off back down the row, obviously on some sort of mission from the little lady. She watched them go. My interest was drawn back to what was happening with the giant pile of shite and Gupsi. Gupsi stood by the oil drum, and the giant lifted the dead boy towards it. I laughed a little to see the two creatures next to each other. It was a heck of a juxtaposition, the giant trash thing and the goblin. They'd checked that Foxglove was doing something else, and when they'd seen that she was focused on other things, with an evil smile, the giant used the little body like a puppet, making it walk around in front of the little wagon. Gupsi and the giant were giggling quietly as if they were small children. It was quite weirdly wholesome to watch in a way. Then Gupsi suddenly went rigid and nodded in Foxglove's direction. The giant froze solid in response, expecting some sort of tongue lashing or maybe some physical lashing. When neither came, he carefully lifted the small corpse to the open top of the drum, into which he dropped it. Gupsi, purposefully not making eye contact with the fairy, then took a cloth from the cart and touched a symbol on the drum. Again, the light that shone from the container top flashed off, and I could imagine more than hear the flushing sound of the process. This was all really interesting. Well, the fairy. Oh, shit, I mentally replied as she flew down the road towards me. She had a proper little psychotic smile on her face.
The Professor. This is an interesting turn-up for the books. Big, thick, important books at that. Books that have serious gravitas. Why did I leave the bloody gun in the bloody office? I looked at the beautiful sword in my hand. I mean, it was an utterly wonderful bit of kit. I swished it about in the air a bit as a distraction, as the wall next to the doorway in which I hid was being chewed up somewhat by sporadic gunfire. Now, you see, the problem here is that I was expecting a paranormal attack, and they don't usually use bloody guns. They use magic and poison daggers, claws and teeth and all that kind of gubbins, but not guns. Against such as that, this sharpened lump of slashy steel has the best sort of stopping power. It's mostly made from iron, which magic doesn't particularly work well around, and it is, I repeat, sharp and slashy, which I won't patronize you by explaining as traits that work particularly well within their own parameters. I'm a little confused as to what to do at this juncture, however. I mean, my arming sword is all well and good, but it kind of requires me to be up close and personal with it, not hiding in a doorway hoping that the people firing at me run out of ammunition before they put a hole in me. Or just stop trying to kill me. There's a lull in the firing, and I do the only thing I can think of.
I say, just what seems to be the matter here?
My ears are ringing with the gunfire, so I speak up a little.
Hello? Is there anything I can do to help you with? Without being shot to bits, I mean. It's really not something I'd like to go through, just at the mo. I mean, my tailor, for starters. Old Ralphie Jr., he finds it difficult to patch these suits. And this is one of them from the 60s. You don't get rolled wool like this anymore. You just don't.
Several more shots left more holes in my oak panelling next to the door. These bloody vandals.
Okay,
I announced.
I get it. You don't like the suit.
I paused. Why are there never people around when I'm being this witty? I continued shouting at my attackers.
I've had about enough of this nonsense.
I was becoming increasingly perplexed by this situation. The least these chaps could do is kill me without damaging my bloody property at the same time. I bet they didn't even take their boots off and wear the guest slippers provided by Vaughnt. No consideration.
All right, I bloody surrender then.
I yelled out of my hidey hole. 2 more shots buried themselves in the door joist. This was utterly out of order.
Look, I bloody surrender, okay? Stop shooting my bloody house to bits, will you? Please!
The hall became silent. No one or thing spoke. So I repeated my request for surrender. Of course, I was probably lying, and once I had the upper hand, I'd do for these dastardly house-killing blackguards. It would be what they utterly deserved. Please don't judge me. I was zoning out in a mental rant when a pair of screw-key handcuffs slipped to a halt at the door. Obviously, the thrower of these delightful antiques was much better with his underarm toss than with their pistol's aim. The ancient cuffs were followed by a very effective-looking gag. I'd seen this type of gag before, but not outside the bordellos of Shanghai in the 30s. Yes, well, that's an interesting mix of items from the past. I did my best Sherlocking at this point. These items were obviously perfect for the tasks that they were required to do. Once you have the right tool for the job, you don't need to improve it. I looked regretfully at my sword. Wrong tool for the job today, I told it, smiling as I did so. Knowing this, I could surmise that the thrown items were of an age that probably meant that the throwers of such items were either very old themselves or simply not human. I assumed it was not human, which oddly made me happier about the situation. Being outfoxed and outplayed by the common man hurts a great deal more than it does by the uncommon other. Well, it does for me anyway. My thought that the restraints were well maintained mattered too. The attackers must be from prior times. This is probably going to be misconstrued as me being ageist, But the older generations knew how to look after their kit properly. They just bloody did. These days you throw things away, you see, and you get new. Most of my days, you fixed it and you maintained it. It was just the way before. For example, I have a fine pair of dress shoes that have none of the original shoe left in them. The parts of them have been fixed, repaired and replaced throughout time so frequently they're basically different shoes. New uppers, new soles, insoles, and laces several times over. But they're still my shoes.
Oh, bloody K!
I yelled in response to that gunshot.
Look, just give me a minute, will you? I'm thinking, okay?
So, they are old things. Very good at their job. And no, I still have no clue who I'm facing. So the Sherlocking was a waste of bloody time.
I'm coming out.
I grumbled.
And if you bloody shoot me, I will be bloody annoyed, so please, don't shoot me.
I told my assailants. I stepped from the doorway with my hands above my head in the prescribed manner of the surrenderee from history. There was no way I was wearing the handcuffs. Well, especially the gag. Well, not without proper introductions, anyway. I am an old-fashioned gentleman, after all.
Oh, look at that bloody mess,
I said, nodding my head towards the damaged wood panels around the doorway.
You can't find a decent tradesman around these parts to do that kind of tricky work these days. They've got no experience with gunshot bloody wounds in wood, okay? They just don't.
I know gunshot wounds in wood sound silly, but it sort of made sense. Please remember, I was under a lot of strain at this point. As I turned to the area the projectiles had come from, I noticed straight away that an aura was cast. Good. They're magic users. I feel a bit better about myself now. To be outdone by the ordinary would be a little humiliating at my time of life and at my own front door. Two figures stepped from the shadows. Well, that's an inconsistent description. Two, what I thought were shadows, seemed to coalesce into more human shape. Bollocks, I thought. Changelings. The Fae had used these creatures throughout history to steal from the tangible realm, be it people, animals, or things that they just wanted to take.
Ah, I thought all your lot were banished. Whoever got you here has some powerful magic, I gather.
I told them. Yes, I know you know me well enough to know that I was talking to prolong our chat and not get down to the real reason why these beings were here. I couldn't give a shit either way. But I have learnt that adding a few seconds to situations often leads me to thinking about how to get out of those situations with tremendous success.
Now, obviously I realise you are changelings. Would you mind awfully if I went and collected my sword? It's iron, and so it would be somewhat effective against you. Are you, gentlemen, willing to give another gentleman, i.e. me, a chance of honour?
I asked the lead, shadow thing. I kept my hands above my head very purposefully while I pointed with my index fingers back to the doorway.
My sword. It's just in there, you know. I could easily pop in there and just grab it.
The lead shadow shook its head. Its shadow head thing. It shook its shadow at me.
Ah, well, I didn't think you would, but if you don't ask, you don't get in this life, do you?
I said as I gave them my best cheeky smile. The second shadow now put its gun somewhere.
How can you hold those guns? You can't touch, can you?
I asked out of professional interest more than anything. They couldn't touch iron, you see. The gun of the lead changeling was moved a little closer to emphasize its presence. An unspoken warning to tell me to shut up, I gathered. Well, even if it wasn't, I thought better than to continue with the question. Then I noticed her on the balcony. Vaughnt, my housekeeper and private killer. She was in a dark shadow. Vaughnt, I chuckled, getting a strange look from the dark robe holding the gun. I know. How did I see the odd look from something without a face? Well, I can tell you that you just pick these things up when you're consistently surrounded by, these things. In response to the odd look, I shrugged. I knew that the chuckle had made the changeling a little uncomfortable, but it was a positive thing right now. The second changeling had now removed something from its shadowy robe and placed it on the ground. It was a fey gold piece, probably brought so that they could open a portal of transportation to take something to the fey realm or somewhere. How interesting. I'd only seen these things used a couple of times and would enjoy watching the process of their use. I wondered if he was going to use the late 12th century Latican invocation, or the earlier Francesco IV version. It's quicker, although it costs a little bit more blood. Interesting. I wondered what would drive their decision one way or the other. I must ask them. Then the situation caught up with me. Oh no, that bloody thing was meant to transport me. Well, I think not. Vaughnt hadn't moved from the shadow on the balcony. What was she bloody doing? Oh dear. She might not know how to deal with what she was seeing. Gosh, though, she was utterly brilliant, was she not? She was simply waiting for me to give her an idea of what she could do to help me. I must say, bravo, old girl. As the second black shadowy creature conjured an expanding, glittering portal, I thought I'd help her out by addressing my captors. If only I had a jar of iron filings that I could burst onto the floor between you, I told them very loudly. There was no reaction from the pistol-toting thing. Because, obviously, that would have killed you. I hoped that Vaughnt understood that this information was actually meant for her. I looked at the Werecat-filled shadow. Nothing seemed to change there. I say again, iron filings would have killed you. I repeated a little louder and with more emphasis on each word. The shadow with the gun looked confused. How does a shadow look confused? Well, I don't know, but it did, okay? And it started to look around the space for something. Then I realized the problem. She didn't know where the jar of iron filings was. What an absolute arse I'd been. Oh, of course, how silly of me. My apologies, I said out loud to the consternation of the pistol-toting cloak. I wish I had that large glass jar of iron filings, ground from Pope-blessed nails from the Vatican, so I could break it near you. That jar is in the second drawer down in the writing desk in the corner of my study, I told the cloaks. The shadow on the balcony emptied and then filled again. Goodness me, that girl was quick. And there was another shadow there that I suddenly noticed. I gave it my attention for a brief moment, and I realized it wasn't a shadow at all. It was her. No, not her. Not Vaughnt, I mean. Her. You know. Lucifer. Again, she was overseeing some plan. Beautiful and dangerous. She gave me a quick smile and a nod of the head before she simply disappeared. I smiled inwardly. The second robe had now finished its work, and a large, sparkly black portal stood in the thin air at its feet. A doorway to another place. Another time, perhaps. Then I saw it. A magnificent sight. A large jar full of black powder sailed from the shadow where the Werecat was. Time had slowed in my mind, and I watched as the gun-holding changeling span, fired 4 shots in quick succession into the shadow that was already empty of Werecat. Bloody good show, Vaughnt. Then, doing something surprising but most satisfying, the cloak shot at the jar in mid-air. I have to say I was incredibly impressed by this display of marksmanship. I've practiced for well over 2 centuries, but I probably couldn't have pulled that shot off more than 3 out of 10 times. I mean, it was incredible luck. The jar shattered in the air, releasing its contents in a large, black, powdery cloud that started to rain down and settle on everyone and everything in the hall. As the iron dust fell onto the 2 creatures, they began to dissolve where it touched them. It was like watching hot water run over sugar crystals. They just melted away in utter silence. The weapons they held hitting the ground, followed by 1 or 2 other personal items they must have had under their cloaks. Then my view was taken as the cloud dusted me. I felt something sharp on my cheek and realized that some of the glass from the jar had cut my face. Time went back into its relative state of normality, and I stood and waited for the proverbial dust to settle. It took a while, but I knew I had to stand and wait. I didn't want to stir up the filings again. As the world became visibly distinct once more, I noticed Vaughnt standing in front of me in her human form. She had somehow managed to get back into her maid's outfit. My goodness me, she was so impressive with her speed. I nodded to her. "Thank you, Vaughnt," I told her. She nodded and disappeared briefly, being replaced in a millisecond by her, with a Henry Hoover in her hand. I smiled. "Wait a mo," I told her as I crouched at the point where the first changeling had stood. I picked up the gun, dusting it down. Clever. It was in a plastic freezer bag. There was no need to touch the steel then. What else did we have in here? Nothing much. A plastic comb? I lifted the comb and showed it to Vaughnt, who shrugged. I didn't know they needed combs," I said to her. She shrugged and looked at me with those get-on-with-it eyes that she did so well before giving me that uncomfy-to-watch double wink of a blink of hers. The fairy portal was still there and coruscating with ethereal energy. It was mesmerizing, and I stared into it, wondering what might be on the other side. I glanced at Vaughnt and gave her a smile. "Would you care to accompany me on a joint jaunt, Vaughnt?" I asked, nodding at the hole in the air. She gave me a feline smile which held enough canine in the dentistry department to make even me shudder. "Let's get changed and arranged for 5 minutes from now. This will be a jolly jape, to be sure." She smiled again, this time with excitement, gave me the blinky wink thing, and disappeared. "Now," I thought to myself, where's that bloody gun?
Brought to you in association with Grendel Press. This is Werewolf the Podcast, a serial killer drama.